This is a little video about replacing the clutch cable on my 77 Toyota Corolla. The clutch cable snapped one morning, broke right above where the clutch pedal is. To replace a clutch cable in this car, it's a bit of a tricky business. One of the things you would certainly want to do is to take the two front seats out of the car. Sounds like a hassle, but it isn't, and it's well worth the trouble because there's only 4 bolts each on the front seats, and they come out rather easily, and that way you have a bed that you can work in upside down, kind of like Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel. You can lay down in the car and get underneath the dash where the clutch cable runs from above the clutch pedal, under the dash, all the way across to the passenger side, through the firewall, and then down around into the bell housing of where the clutch is. Show you that here in a second. Now, just for a little further information on what the problem was exactly, how the clutch cable broke, is up under the dash where the clutch pedal is, and at the top of the clutch pedal, the cable that makes the trip from the passenger side to the driver's side comes across a small pulley in there, and right in the vicinity where it comes across the pulley, you have the top of the pedal, and the top of the pedal is connected by a linkage that looks like this. See? And this is the actual piece of cable that snapped off, and you can see the snapped end here. Okay? So the cable frayed and broke, and that's what this is the part that would connect to the top of the clutch pedal, and the cable continues on, and it broke there. So you get a new clutch cable and you replace the whole run. Always best to do that, especially since this one happens to be 40 years old, and this is a very special kind of connector, an end on the cable that is not a common thing. It'd be hard to find that and to get the exact right shape and all. So it's always best to put a new cable in. And that's what happened to this clutch cable. Okay, underneath the Toyota, this is the bell housing, and here's the clutch cable coming in. Let's have a close look at that linkage. You can see the clutch arm. So we're up here. There's the linkage, and coming in close to it. Okay, clearly this pin keeps this fork from falling off the end of the clutch arm. That's all that pin does. Amazing, after all these years, just that little pin kept that from popping off of there. And the clutch cable itself comes through this piece of linkage, this whole part of this fork. That's the cable. Here's the cable back here by my 2 fingers right there. Passes through this rubber boot, which is kind of chewed up. It comes in here, and hopefully the new cable will have this kind of end on it. And then attaches itself inside this whole housing here, which is what keeps it from slipping off that fork, and then when it pulls on this whole arm toward the front of the car, releasing the clutch. So that should give us a pretty good idea of what we're up against here when we get down under the car to connect this. And that's what goes on down underneath the car. Here you can see where the clutch cable comes through the firewall on the passenger side. That's it right there. Following that cable down, it goes down and around in the vicinity of the filter, the oil filter there, and down under the oil filter, and you can see where it goes down toward the bell housing to make a connection. And right there is where it is permanently connected to the bell housing, and then goes on to make the connections to the clutch linkage that goes to the fork, the lever arm called the fork that is the action of the clutch itself. So all of that's under the hood. And now we'll visit under the dash to show how this particular portion, how that cable passes through the firewall and makes the trip from the passenger side of the vehicle to the driver's side where the clutch pedal is. Now I'm lying down upside down in the car, and we're going up here, up under the dash. We're under the glove compartment right now. That's this tan colored thing. And then a little further on to where the cable comes through the firewall, and you can just see the bit of white pulley there. And the pulley has one clip on it, and that is the cable coming around, goes onto that pulley, and it comes around and it goes toward the driver's side, and it goes underneath everything, past the blower fan there for the ventilation ducting, and goes over to the driver's side. Now, as we are removing the old cable, which has that broken end right there, we have pulled it out from under the dash, all along from the driver passenger side, and this is now the end of the cable going straight ahead through the firewall. Coming around to the other end of that, we're going to be able to extract the entire cable, which comes right through here. Right? And we're going to pull this cup out here, which contains the entire cable, and there's a little clip ring right here that sets the adjustment of the cable. We're going to pull that cup out, and then the cable will follow. Right here is the cable, and it'll come out toward us through that firewall, and this is all a part of the cable that was underneath the dash that went to, see, there's your broken end, and that's what went to the clutch, the top of the clutch pedal. So now the entire cable is in the engine compartment of the Toyota, and we'll continue with this soon, but for now I wanted to show that part, that we're down to having the cable here in the engine compartment and then down to the bell housing where the clutch lever arm or clutch fork is. So, stand by for the next part. The new clutch cable comes from this, appears to say Beck Ernley, but that's where the clutch cable manufacturer is, and we got it from Advance Auto Parts on September 1st, 2011. I'll show you the cable. There is the entire new clutch cable assembly, and coming in close here, you can see this is the end that goes onto the clutch pedal under the dash, top of the clutch pedal, and goes around under the dash. This is the part that would fasten to the firewall, which you just saw us pull out, and the whole cable is about 6 feet long, and this is the end with that rubber boot that will end up being attached at the clutch housing lever arm. There's a real close-up of the business end of how the cable is made. You can see that's a very strong press fit there on the end of the cable where it attaches to the linkage under the car. One clutch cable, ready to go. Now this rubber fitting that was is on the cable that fit into that hole actually just comes off the cable and will go on to the new cable, and just fit it onto the cable, and that's going to be there. It goes through the firewall and that's where that retainer clip will be on this groove coming from the old cable. Is a large C-clip that's going to guide how far this part of the cable goes into the firewall, which would of course adjust the initial tension on the clutch itself. And now we'll get the rest of the cable out and compare the length of this one with the old one, make sure that we're dealing with exactly the same thing for the replacement. Okay, here's that C-clip on the cable that I'm talking about that's going to come off and go on to the new cable. There are a total of 14 grooves here. This one happens to be in the 7th groove. It's right in the middle, so that was the original adjustment on the cable. So we're going to take that C-clip off and put it on the new cable. There's the C-clip, and we'll be placing that onto the new cable in the 7th groove. There are a total of 14 grooves in the old cable and 14 grooves on the new cable. So this will go right in the center, like that'll be the initial adjustment, which will be the same as before. Okay, now this is still the old cable in place, but if you follow it down and you look down here at the bell housing, down through here, you could actually see where, and if I were to just yank on the cable from my end, you can see it pulling on that clutch arm, just yanking on it. So that's the action we're looking for. And the next thing for us to do is to remove that linkage down there off of the clutch arm or clutch fork, and then we'll be ready to put the new cable in. Okay, we're down under the car. Now to disconnect from the clutch lever arm or the fork right here, if you're very clever, you don't even have to take this cotter pin off, okay? Because at the top of this square connector here, there's a slot for the cable to come out of. So all you really have to do is sort of pop the cable, bring the cable forward, and pop it through the groove, say, through that groove. I don't know if you can see that. See? And the cable will slip out from there, like so. At that point, you can push the cable back out of the way. And there's the end of it there. And this piece comes off separately. And that's how we'll be attaching the new cable. And if you look at this particular type of connection, you see the groove there on one side. The cable can pass through that slot to connect to this linkage. And this pin actually never had to be removed at all. Okay, although that's an option, but you could save the trouble of having to bend this pin. Maybe you break it, you don't have another one. So you're able to remove that separately. And of course, when you have the large size hole like that, you can slip it back onto the fork arm pretty easily, right? And then down into position. And when the new cable comes in, we'll connect it accordingly. Okay, so we get the new cable. That's when get the new cable here. That's what we'll be doing, is connecting that to that square linkage. And of course, that connects to this arm, which is the clutch lever arm or the fork. So that'll be the next thing after we get the clutch pulled out. Now, the clutch cable itself has to be pulled out of the bell housing, which is a bit tricky. And that's up here where my finger is pointing. It's real hard to get a shot of that. But it's up in there, and that has to be yanked out. So let's see if I can do that next. Okay, here's another angle. There's the clutch link, the clutch lever arm or the fork. There's that linkage we were talking about. Here's the end of the cable, which is now detached from the linkage. And further back is the mounting to the bell housing right here. And this has to be pried out. So if I can get the screwdriver in there, we're going to back that guy out of there. You see it's You see it's starting to come out there. Alright, screwdriver blade right into that slot and just pry it out gently. Coax it right on out of there. I may be able to pull that now by hand. Pulling on the cable itself. And there it is. It just popped through the hole. This whole part was shoved into the bell housing hole. Just a press fit. Okay, that's the end of the cable linkage there, the end of the cable. Passing through this hole in the bell housing, and you just kind of yank it through, and there it is. And now the entire cable is free, and we'll bring it up and out of the engine compartment. Okay, we were just down under there. Here's the cable. It's now free from the bell housing and free from the clutch linkage, and we have the cable out. And what we'll do, we're going to lay this cable down on the ground next to the new one and compare the two cables. They should be identical. Okay, installing the new cable. You just got both ends in my hand here. We'll take, we're in the engine compartment, we'll take the one heavy part of the cable and pass it down sort of under everything and into the vicinity of the clutch linkage down there, that where we'll be going with that end. And this end goes through this hole into the compartment, into the inside of the car, under the dash, and then that cup that is used to adjust the clutch based on where the clip is, where the C-clip is, goes there. We'll make all the final adjustments after we get the lever arm side of it under the car attached to the linkage as I demonstrated earlier. Now, if you have a hard time getting the cable fitting to go into the hole in the bell housing, recommend you use a rather large pair of channel locks like this. You get this fitting flush against the bell housing, and then the cable is fed through. Here's the cable end, and we'll be connecting to the clutch arm momentarily. But you've seen that in the earlier part of the video, so if you want to review how that's connected, you could look at that part when we took the old one off. It's exactly the same. Okay, so we have the cable connected to the clutch lever arm under the car, and if I were to pull on the cable here with the light I have coming from underneath, you can see the action there as I pull on it, as before. Okay, that's the actual linkage to the clutch and the clutch lever arm you see there, and I can pull and I can move that clutch arm. And that's all fastened underneath, and it's been greased up. So now all we have to do is get into adjusting the cable up here through the firewall at this point here, and getting the proper adjustment, and then passing the entire length of cable under the dash to the clutch pedal. Here's a little diagram of what we're doing. Here in this picture you can see the clutch cable and the clutch pedal. There's the top of the pedal under the dash. 3 is pointing to the clutch cable, but this is the fitting under the car that we've done, and we're going to work our way under the dash to get to the top of the clutch pedal and connect that to that, and that would be the clutch action. This is a return spring which we have taken off. Put that back on shortly, and when you depress the clutch pedal, it's going to pull on the cable and release the clutch. So that's where we're headed now, and we'll get that in position. Okay, we've brought this end of the clutch cable up and around, and here you can see that C-clip we spoke of earlier on the 7th groove. There's 14 of them in all. We'll put it in the middle one like it was before, and then we'll be passing that cable into the firewall through that fitting, and that's how the cable stops. So that's basically going to be your, well, you know, clutch pedal free play adjustment, you know, basically the initial setup of the clutch action. So that's through there, and now we'll be going back under the dash to run the cable where it's supposed to go to reach the clutch pedal. The cable comes through the firewall, and you can just see the bit of white pulley there, and the pulley has one clip on it, and that is the cable coming around, goes onto that pulley, and it comes around and it goes toward the driver's side, and it goes underneath everything, past the blower fan there for the ventilation ducting, and goes over to the driver's side. Let's take a look at that. As I depress the clutch pedal, you can just see the action. That's the top of the clutch pedal grabbing that special connector we showed earlier and pulling on it. I'm pressing the clutch pedal with my hand, and that is the connection that you must make, and it goes around a pulley just behind that connector there. It's a pretty tricky little spot, but you can do it, and that's how it should look as you're depressing the clutch pedal. Thanks for watching. I hope this instructional video helps you should you ever have to do this on an older Toyota Corolla with a manual clutch. Have a nice day.